Hey everybody, welcome back to GR Research, where we are doing more Klipsch upgrades. Yes, that's right. You guys just keep sending me Klipsch speakers, so here we go. I got the little, what is this, the 500M sitting up here again. I shot the factory measurements of this one in a video that was posted a couple weeks ago. It's one of the next ones up on the upgrade list. I'm about to do something for this one, so that's coming. But I wanted to throw it up in this video just to balance things out a little bit and remind you guys, hey, I'm not picking on these Klipsch guys. They do some pretty nice work. This one measured really well. If you want to go find the video that I did on it, you can look at the measurements. It measured great, better than any of the other models. So they do some pretty decent design work. So that being said, Klipsch guys, what is up with the rest of these things? This is the 6000F. It's the floor standing version with the 6-inch woofers. And I know you can't see it completely in the video here. I'm going to flip it over and turn it around and you can see everything. So, but I've got it standing up here so that I can at first show you guys what's inside. Same stuff that's in all these little Klipsch speakers. Cheesy stuff. There are some polyester film caps on everything. There's still an iron core inductor on the woofers. There is a couple of air core inductors also. Sandcast resistors, PVC jacketed wire, and yes, all the connections and the screws on the back of the terminals are all just steel, not brass, not copper. Steel, yes, I know. So, not the greatest. And keep in mind still they're trying to hit price points with these things. And they're trying to keep the prices really low. Let me lay this thing over so you can get a better look at it. There you go. Now at least you can see the whole speaker. And it's not standing up in the way. So let's talk about the engineering and the design of this thing and what's going on with these speakers. So let's look at some measurements. I'm going to pull up for you guys stock factory measurements and then we're going to look at what I wound up doing with this thing. Now, the way they have this wired, it's a two-way speaker, so that means both woofers are playing together, and then the tweeter. What that causes is the acoustic centers to be far apart. So the acoustic center is going to be midway point between the two woofers to the tweeter. What that does is it makes it causes time delays from one to the other as you move up and down vertically. There's time arrival differences because those drivers are so far apart, and it starts causing cancellation. And when I took a measurement on this on tweeter axis, which is an industry standard, we measure on tweeter axis because that's pretty much your ear level. And when you're seated, your ear level is pretty close to the tweeter. Let's look at the on-axis response. If you look at it, it's got a bit of a hole there in the crossover point. There's a dip, and it's very common with the Klipsch models. I've seen it across a bunch of these things. It's still within plus or minus 3.5, 4 dB. And true, if you start moving the microphone down to the top woofer axis, the time delays shift in such a manner that that dip starts to come up a little bit. However, they're still not in phase very well. What do I mean by not in phase very well? Let's look at the crossover response. This is individual tweeter response, individual woofers response. So we got tweeter here, woofers here, and the tweeter level is about a dB or so louder than the woofers, which again is typical of the way they voice a lot of their speakers. That's why some of them are a little in your face and get a little hard to listen to after a while. Tweeter level is a little hot. Then look as they roll into each other. What we want to see when they fall into each other like that is we want to see a summation of the two to where it makes a balanced response. That means the drivers are in phase. And also if you look at where they're crossing, if the summation is 6 dB up, then that's a good indication that they're in phase very well. In this case, if you look at the crossover response, you'll see that the summation barely comes up over the individual driver's response as they're falling. So they're about 80 degrees out of phase. So they're not 180 degrees out of phase, which would make a complete cancellation, which would be less than the summation of the two. But they're not gaining anything either. Maybe just they're gaining a little bit, but not much. If you start moving the microphone down, and in this case at the seating position, that would mean putting your head on the floor, then the time delay of the tweeter would be moved back in time in such a way that they would start to become in phase. But that would be ridiculous. And keep in mind too that the vertical off axis, meaning the time arrival and the time of the phase effect of the drivers, which is time arrival, needs to be such that they're in phase over a wide range and that they create a more even room response. If you've got an irregular off-axis response, whether it be vertical or horizontal, then the overall room response can be a little rough. You want it balanced, completely smooth. So let's look at that. Let's look at the horizontal off-axis, which drops off evenly, but then again, the on-axis was a bit of a hole. So not great. The vertical off-axis, as we look at it on tweeter axis and we start going up 4 inches per measurement, we see a huge suck out starting. Just a 4-inch movement over tweeter axis and the hold is really deep. And that would be the orange line. If you look then at that yellow line that you see on the graph, that's just moved up 8 inches. Now we're completely out of phase. That's the huge hole. So you can imagine an uneven room response. And then as you move up 4 more inches, you'll notice that it's actually about the same. It's starting to come back up a little bit. So it's starting to come back around the other direction. So still not good. And if you look at the impedance response, you'll see that the impedance on the tweeter end is a little bit higher than the impedance on the woofer end. A little mismatched, not bad. Spectral decay, though, that's the stored energy in this thing, is actually pretty good. I mean, really good. It drops off real cleanly, so no driver ringing going on there. So that part is okay. Cabinet-wise, very lightly braced, a lot of cabinet resonances there. So you got that to deal with, plus all these parts in the signal path that's smearing the signal, corrupting the signal, all that is causing a problem. So looking at the on-axis response after I finished the new upgrade, you can see that now it's much smoother. What I did was I made this into a 2.5-way design. We're crossing the tweeter only to the top woofer, and we're using just a first order filter on the lower woofer, and we're pulling it back further so that the acoustic centers is more at the top woofer. So we're not causing as big a difference between the time arrivals of the woofer versus the tweeter. So all that is a lot more balanced. If we look at the crossover responses, you'll see now these are the individual driver's response. In the lower line there in the blue, you see the lower woofer only. Then you see the upper woofer and the tweeter. And then the red line is the summation of the two. Nice and balanced. Tweeter's not hotter than the woofers. It's going to be an easier to listen to speaker. If we look at the horizontal off-axis, we see it dropping away very even in the off-axis. In fact, the tweeter actually has a pretty smooth response. If you go up to, again, that crossover response that we just looked at, notice how smoothly that tweeter rolls off. That's still with a first order filter on that tweeter and an L pad. And the L pad is just resistors that are bringing the levels down. But that's a nicely well-controlled tweeter. I didn't have to put a bunch of parts on it. The woofer also, there's a second order filter on the woofer on this one, first order on this lower woofer. So it doesn't involve a lot of parts. That's a bonus. Lessen the signal path, lower cost. Now we can use higher quality parts. Let's look at the vertical off-axis now. Vertical off-axis, we're on tweeter axis, and then we're moving up 4 inches. Notice the orange line now. It's starting to drop a little bit, not much. We're talking, now you're moving up and down in a range, and because the acoustic centers are closer together, we're keeping a more even response over a wider range. Now note that at the yellow line, that's now 8 inches up. Starting to drop out a little bit, but not too bad. I mean, the acoustic centers are still pretty far apart because of the diameter of that tweeter. And then if you look at the green line, you can see it's starting to drop out pretty good. That's 12 inches up at 1 meter. So that would be like putting your head at the very top of your ceiling from the listening distance. So the response vertically and horizontally now, much more balanced overall. And if you look at the impedance curve, you'll note that the impedance on the tweeter end has been brought back down a little bit and is a little more balanced. I was able to work with those resistor values and use a little more in shunt and less in inline and try to balance things out a little bit so it's a lot more balanced. Also, spectral decay again, super clean spectral decay. This thing drops off super clean across the board, so no issues there. Again, parts count was pretty low, and I came up with a kit for this thing. All the new parts that you're going to need, all new wiring, 3 sheets of no risk, because you're going to need 3 sheets of no risk for this thing to damp out all of this cabinet resonances. That adds up a little bit. A set of tube connectors came to $435. So for $435, you can take this mess and turn it into a pretty dang nice speaker that should be really nice to listen to, super balanced, and after the upgrade, one of the better Klipsch models that I've worked on. So that's it for the upgrade on the Klipsch RP-6000F. Thanks for watching, you guys. If you haven't subscribed, please do. I appreciate the subscriptions. Hit that little bell notification button too. You'll be notified when new videos pop up. That's it for this episode. Thanks for watching.